For decades, many people believed that once they found a shampoo that worked for them, they could keep using it forever. The bottle might get a new design, the marketing might change, but the formula inside, that would stay the same. After all, if a product was successful enough to stay on store shelves for years, why would a company risk changing it? But behind the scenes of the beauty industry, formula changes happen far more often than most consumers realize. Sometimes ingredients become more expensive, sometimes regulations change. Sometimes manufacturers discover cheaper alternatives that perform almost the same. And sometimes companies make quiet adjustments because of supply chain issues that affect raw materials. When those changes happen, the public rarely hears about them. In fact, many companies intentionally keep formula changes subtle. Because if customers notice too many differences, they may begin asking questions. And that brings us to a story that started inside a product development meeting at a major shampoo company. According to a former cosmetic chemist who later spoke anonymously with industry journalists, the meeting was supposed to be routine. The brand had been on the market for years. It sold millions of bottles every month. But the company's research team had discovered a way to reduce production costs. A key ingredient used in the shampoo's conditioning system had become more expensive due to changes in global supply chains. Replacing it with a slightly different compound would save the company millions of dollars per year. Chemically speaking, the replacement ingredient worked similarly. Both compounds helped smooth the hair shaft and reduce static, but there were subtle differences. The original ingredient left hair feeling slightly softer and lighter. The replacement ingredient produced a similar effect, but could sometimes leave behind a heavier residue on certain hair types. In laboratory testing, the difference appeared small. Most participants in controlled trials didn't notice it immediately. And that's when one executive reportedly made a comment that stuck with the chemist years later. Consumers won't notice, the room nodded. After all, the product would still foam. It would still smell the same, the packaging wouldn't change. From a marketing perspective, the shampoo would remain identical. The only difference was the cost of the ingredient inside. So the formula was updated. Production lines switched to the new ingredient. And within months, the reformulated shampoo was shipping to stores across the country. For most consumers, nothing seemed different. The bottle looked exactly the same, the fragrance remained unchanged. The advertising continued promising the same benefits, but slowly, some loyal customers began noticing something odd. Their hair didn't feel quite the same. At first, the difference was hard to describe. Hair seemed slightly heavier after washing. Some people felt their hair became oily faster between washes. Others noticed their usual styling routine didn't produce the same results. Online forums began filling with posts from confused customers. Did they change the formula? My hair used to feel amazing with this shampoo, but now it feels different. I've been using this brand for years. Why does it suddenly feel heavier? For months, the company didn't respond publicly. Because technically, nothing about the product's claims had changed. The shampoo still cleaned hair. It still contained conditioning ingredients. It still met regulatory standards, but the ingredient swap had altered the balance of the formula in subtle ways. And eventually, enough consumers noticed that the conversation spread beyond small online communities. Beauty bloggers began comparing old and new ingredient lists. Cosmetic chemists examined the labels, and slowly, the difference became clear. The original conditioning agent had been replaced, not with something dangerous, not with something illegal, just something cheaper. From a business standpoint, the decision made sense. Large consumer product companies operate on tight margins. Saving even a few cents per bottle can translate into millions of dollars over time. But from the consumer's perspective, the change raised a different question: if a product works well, should companies quietly alter the formula without telling the people who depend on it? The beauty industry has long relied on what's known as continuous improvement. products evolve gradually over time as manufacturers adjust formulas. Sometimes these changes genuinely improve performance. Other times, they address safety concerns or remove controversial ingredients. But occasionally, the changes are purely economic. Ingredients are swapped for lower-cost alternatives. Production processes are simplified. Manufacturers look for efficiencies wherever they can find them. Most of the time, consumers never notice, but when they do notice, it can create an unusual situation. A product that once built customer loyalty suddenly feels unfamiliar. And because hair care is deeply personal, even small changes can feel significant. Hair behaves differently depending on its structure. Fine hair reacts differently than thick hair. Curly hair responds differently than straight hair. So a minor formula adjustment that seems insignificant in laboratory testing can produce noticeable differences in real-world use. For the chemist who attended that meeting years earlier, the experience revealed something fascinating about the beauty industry. Consumers often assume that expensive marketing campaigns reflect the full story behind a product. But the real decisions shaping those products often happen quietly in laboratories and boardrooms. And sometimes a single sentence spoken in a meeting can change the formula of a product used by millions of people. Consumers won't notice, but what happened next proved something important. Sometimes they do. In the next part of this story, we'll explore how cosmetic chemists actually reformulate shampoos and why even small ingredient changes can affect how hair behaves over time. When consumers hear that a shampoo formula has been changed, the reaction is often confusion. How could one ingredient make such a noticeable difference? After all, most shampoos contain 20 or more components. Water, cleansing agents, conditioners, thickeners, preservatives, fragrance. It's easy to assume that replacing a single ingredient shouldn't matter very much. But cosmetic chemists understand something that most consumers never see. Shampoo formulas are extremely delicate systems. Every ingredient interacts with the others. Change one component, and the balance of the entire formula can shift. To understand why, it helps to look at how shampoo is actually built. At the core of every shampoo are surfactants. Surfactants are cleansing agents that remove oil, dirt, and styling product residue from hair. They work by surrounding oil molecules and allowing them to wash away with water, but surfactants can also be harsh. If a shampoo relied only on strong surfactants, hair would feel extremely dry after washing. That's why conditioning agents are added. Conditioners coat the hair shaft with a thin layer that reduces friction and static. They help strands glide past each other smoothly instead of tangling. But here's where things become complicated. Different conditioning agents behave differently depending on the type of hair. Some are extremely lightweight. Others are heavier and more moisturizing. Some rinse away easily. Others remain attached to the hair even after rinsing. The original ingredient used in the shampoo formula from the earlier story belonged to a group known as cationic conditioning polymers. These molecules carry a positive electrical charge. Hair fibers tend to carry a slight negative charge after washing. That means the conditioning polymer naturally attaches itself to the hair surface. This helps smooth the cuticle, the outer layer of the hair strand, and reduces frizz. But not all conditioning polymers behave exactly the same. Some create an extremely light coating. Others form thicker layers that build up gradually with repeated use. When the company replaced the original ingredient with a cheaper alternative, the replacement polymer had a slightly different molecular structure. It still conditioned the hair, but it also adhered more strongly to the hair shaft. Over time, this created a subtle buildup effect for some users. Hair began to feel heavier between washes, volume decreased, and because the formula still contained mild surfactants, the shampoo wasn't strong enough to remove all of that buildup each time. This is a perfect example of how cosmetic chemistry involves trade-offs. The replacement ingredient wasn't unsafe. It wasn't even technically worse in every situation. In fact, people with very dry or thick hair may have preferred the heavier conditioning effect. But for people with fine hair, the type most sensitive to buildup, the difference became noticeable. And that's exactly what happened once consumers began comparing their experiences online. Hair care forums filled with discussions. Some people insisted the product had changed. Others said they noticed no difference at all. And a few even said they liked the new formula better. From the company's perspective, the reformulation was still considered successful. The majority of customers continued buying the product. Sales remained strong. But the conversation highlighted something fascinating about the way people experience beauty products. Hair care isn't just chemistry, it's habit. Many people use the same shampoo for years.
Better, but the scent
Their
profile
hair
is still
becomes
slightly
accustomed
off.
to the
I agree.
formula.
Let's adjust the
Their
fragrance notes
styling
and retest the
routines
stability.
adapt to how that product behaves. So when the formula changes, even slightly, the difference can feel surprisingly dramatic. For cosmetic chemists, this is one of the biggest challenges in reformulation. If an ingredient must be replaced, the goal isn't just to replicate the technical function. The goal is to replicate the user experience, how the shampoo feels when it lathers, how easily it rinses out, how the hair feels once it dries, even the way the fragrance lingers afterward. Achieving that balance can be extremely difficult because every adjustment affects something else. Changing a conditioning polymer may require adjusting surfactants. Altering surfactants may change foam stability. Changing foam stability may require adjusting thickeners. Each modification creates a ripple effect throughout the formula, and sometimes even the most careful adjustments still produce small differences. That's why some companies conduct extensive consumer testing before releasing reformulated products. Panels of volunteers test both versions without knowing which one they are using. Researchers track whether participants notice differences in texture, scent, or performance. If the majority of testers report similar experiences, the reformulation moves forward. But even the most thorough testing cannot replicate real-world conditions perfectly. Hair behaves differently depending on humidity, water hardness, styling habits, and dozens of other factors. So once the product reaches millions of homes, new reactions can appear. Some people love the new formula, others miss the old one. And a small but vocal group may search stores for leftover bottles of the original version. It's a phenomenon that has happened repeatedly in the personal care industry. Sometimes companies eventually bring back the original formula. Other times the new version simply becomes the new normal. But the deeper lesson behind the story isn't really about one shampoo brand. It's about something much larger. The products we use every day are constantly evolving. Manufacturers adjust formulas, regulations change. Ingredients become more expensive or harder to source. And those changes happen quietly, often without public announcements. Most of the time, consumers never notice, but occasionally, someone does. And when they do, it reveals something fascinating about modern consumer culture. People are paying more attention to what they use on their bodies. They read ingredient lists, they compare formulas, they share experiences online, and they ask questions that companies didn't expect decades ago. Questions about transparency, questions about quality, questions about whether the product they trusted yesterday is still the same today. For the chemist who attended that meeting years ago, the memory of that one sentence never disappeared. Consumers won't notice, but the truth turned out to be more complicated. Because sometimes consumers notice everything. And when they do, they remind companies of something very simple. Trust isn't built only through marketing, it's built through consistency. The kind of consistency that keeps people reaching for the same bottle year after year. And when that bottle changes, even in small ways, people eventually find out, sometimes faster than anyone expected.